Imagine this. A struggling waitress in a small, forgotten town offers a simple act of kindness to a family in need. She doesn't know their names and they don't know hers. But what happens next will change her life, and theirs, forever. This is a story of resilience, compassion, and the incredible ripple effect of even the smallest good deeds. How can one selfless gesture unlock a chain of events that leads to a legacy far beyond what anyone could have imagined? Join us as we follow Claire's journey, a journey of unexpected opportunities, heartwarming reunions, and a powerful reminder that kindness has the power to transform not just lives, but entire communities. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this one. Your support helps us share the messages that matter most. Now let's begin the story. You won't want to miss a single moment. A struggling waitress covered a family's bill and got an unexpected visit from the CEO. The diner was dimly lit, a soft, yellow glow spilling from its vintage light fixtures onto the worn, checkered tiles below. Claire adjusted her apron and glanced at the clock above the register. Another hour before closing, and the winter chill outside seemed to seep through the walls, even with the heater humming softly in the background. It was a quiet night. Like most others in this small, forgotten town, Claire had grown used to the rhythm of her days. At 28, her life was a cycle of long shifts at the diner, late nights caring for her father and squeezing in moments of rest when she could. Bills piled up faster than tips, and her dreams of art school now seemed like relics of a different lifetime. Still, she carried herself with quiet resilience, always offering a warm smile to the few regulars who frequented the diner. The doorbell jingled, its sound crisp against the silence. Claire turned to see a young family stepping in. The father looked to be in his mid-30s, his coat slightly frayed at the edges, and his face drawn with fatigue. The mother held a small child bundled in a too-thin jacket, their rosy cheeks peeking out from under a woolen hat. They hesitated near the entrance, as though unsure if they should stay. "Welcome in," Claire called out, her voice carrying a gentle warmth. "Take a seat wherever you like." The family chose a booth near the back, away from the drafty windows. As Claire approached with menus, she noticed the father's hands trembling slightly as he pulled off his gloves. The child, a boy of about 5, smiled at her, his bright eyes a stark contrast to the weariness etched on his parents' faces. "Can I get you something to drink while you decide?" she asked, her practiced cheerfulness masking her concern. "Just water for now," the mother replied softly, her voice tinged with embarrassment. Claire nodded and returned moments later with 3 glasses of water, her mind already racing. She had seen this before. Families on the edge of desperation, trying to make ends meet, but too proud to ask for help. The family ordered modestly, a bowl of soup to share and a small sandwich. Claire pretended not to notice the way they glanced at the prices on the menu, their whispers barely audible as they tried to decide. When it came time to settle the bill, the father approached the register, his face pale. "I'm so sorry," he began, pulling out a card from his wallet. "I think there's been a mistake. Can you try this again?" Claire swiped the card a second time, her heart sinking as the machine beeped its denial. She handed it back to him, her voice soft. "I'm afraid it didn't go through." The father's shoulders sagged, and he glanced at his wife, who was trying to keep the child distracted. I don't have another card. Let me step outside and make a call." Before he could move, Claire reached out and placed a hand on his arm, stopping him gently. "It's all right," she said, forcing a reassuring smile. "Dinner's on the house tonight, don't worry about it." The man's eyes widened. "No, we can't." "Please," Claire interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "It's just a little something. Take it as a treat from us." For a moment the man was silent, his throat working as he struggled to find words. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire watched as he returned to the table, his wife's expression shifting from worry to astonishment as he explained. The child beamed at Claire, waving enthusiastically. "Thank you, miss," he called out, his small voice carrying across the empty diner. Claire felt her chest tighten. She waved back, forcing herself to focus on wiping down the counter. It wasn't the first time she had done something like this, but it never got easier. Her own struggles didn't vanish just because she helped someone else, but somehow it always felt worth it. As the family left, the father paused by the door. "I'll find a way to repay you," he said, meeting Claire's eyes. "I promise." She shook her head, her smile soft and genuine. "Take care of your family. That's all that matters." The door closed behind them, the bell's chime fading into the quiet. Claire stood for a moment, staring out at the snow-covered street beyond. She told herself it was just another day, another small act of kindness, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about this moment was different. The night passed and Claire locked up the diner, her thoughts still lingering on the family. She didn't know their names or where they came from, but she hoped they found the warmth and comfort they needed. As she walked home through the biting cold, the weight of her own struggles pressed heavily on her shoulders. Yet there was a small, quiet part of her that felt lighter, as though the simple act of giving had chipped away at the burden she carried. Little did she know, the seed she had planted that evening would grow into something far greater than she could imagine. The diner buzzed softly with the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint sizzle of a grill, and the occasional clatter of plates. It was another slow evening, the kind Claire had grown used to. She moved through her usual routine, wiping down the counter, refilling the ketchup bottles, and glancing at the clock as it ticked toward closing time. She paused to stretch her tired shoulders when the bell above the door jingled. Claire turned, expecting to see one of the regulars. Instead, a man in a sleek navy suit stepped in, his polished leather shoes clicking softly against the worn tiles. His confident stride and air of authority made him seem entirely out of place. In the modest diner, "Good evening," Claire greeted, her voice steady despite her curiosity. "Take a seat wherever you'd like." The man surveyed the diner for a moment, his sharp eyes scanning the booths before settling on her. Instead of sitting, he walked directly to the counter where Claire stood. "You must be Claire," he said, his tone warm yet deliberate. Claire blinked, caught off guard. "That's me," she replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" The man smiled faintly and extended a hand. "I'm Henry Walker. You helped my family the other night, when our card didn't go through." Recognition dawned on Claire. The father, from the struggling family, but dressed so differently now that she hardly recognized him. She shook his hand, still unsure what to say. "It's nice to meet you," she managed. "I'm glad you and your family are doing okay." "More than okay, thanks to you," Henry said, his voice genuine. "My wife and I haven't stopped talking about your kindness. It's rare to meet someone who would go out of their way for strangers like that." Claire shifted awkwardly. Compliments always made her uncomfortable, especially when she felt she'd done nothing extraordinary. "I didn't do much," she said modestly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It was just a meal." "To you, maybe," Henry said, leaning slightly against the counter. "But to us it meant everything. You showed my son that there are good people in the world, even when things feel hopeless." Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. She busied herself by straightening a stack of napkins, hoping to hide her reaction. "I'm just glad I could help," she said softly. Henry reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black envelope. He placed it on the counter between them. "What's this?" Claire asked, eyeing it warily. "An invitation," he replied. "My company is hosting a charity gala this weekend. It's an event we hold annually to support families in need. I'd like you to come as my guest." Claire stared at the envelope, her mind racing. A charity gala? It sounded glamorous, something far removed from her life of long shifts and second-hand clothes. "I'm not sure I'd fit in at something like that," she said hesitantly, pushing the envelope back toward him. Henry didn't take it. You'd fit in perfectly, he said firmly. That event isn't about money or status. It's about people, about kindness, generosity, and making a difference. That's exactly what you embody. Claire's cheeks flushed, and she shook her head. I don't think I... Please, Henry interrupted, his tone softening. You gave us kindness when we needed it most. This is my way of saying thank you. No strings attached. Claire hesitated, her fingers brushing against the edge of the envelope. The logical part of her screamed that this wasn't her world, that she should politely decline and move on. But a quiet voice deep inside whispered something else, a curiosity about what might happen if she said yes. Henry seemed to sense her hesitation. Just think about it, he said, stepping back and adjusting his cufflinks. No pressure, but if you decide to come, everything you need is in that envelope. He glanced at his watch and smiled again. I won't take up more of your time. Thank you again, Claire. You're an extraordinary person. With that, he turned and walked out, the bell jingling softly as the door closed behind him. Claire stood frozen for a moment, staring at the envelope. She picked it up and opened it cautiously, revealing an elegant invitation embossed with gold lettering. The details of the gala were printed in neat script, along with a note at the bottom. Dress code, formal. She let out a dry laugh, glancing down at her scuffed sneakers and worn jeans. Formal attire wasn't exactly in her closet. Sinking onto one of the stools, Claire placed the invitation on the counter and rested her chin in her hands. The idea of attending the gala felt absurd, like stepping into a world that wasn't meant for someone like her. And yet, a small part of her couldn't help but wonder, what if she went? As she locked up the diner that night, the envelope tucked securely in her bag, Claire's thoughts churned. The man's words replayed in her mind. You gave us kindness. When we needed it most, she didn't feel extraordinary. But maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to step outside the narrow confines of her life and see what else the world had to offer. The snow fell gently as Claire walked home, her footsteps crunching against the frosty ground. In her heart, the first seeds of change were quietly taking root. The towering glass doors of the Grand Magnolia Hotel reflected Claire's hesitant figure as she stepped out of the cab. Her thrift store dress, a simple navy blue gown, hung modestly on her frame. Though she had styled her hair and applied a touch of makeup, she still felt woefully underdressed. Taking a deep breath, Claire tightened her grip on the small clutch she borrowed from a friend and stepped inside. The grand lobby, adorned with crystal chandeliers and gleaming marble floors, was a stark contrast to the humble diner she called her second home. She followed the signs toward the ballroom, the low murmur of voices and clinking glasses growing, louder with each step. When she reached the entrance, a polished attendant checked her name against the guest list and gestured her in with a polite smile. "Enjoy your evening, miss," he said. Claire nodded, her heart racing as she stepped into the room. It was breathtaking. Golden lights bathed the elegantly decorated space, and guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled over champagne flutes. A soft jazz band played in the corner, their melody weaving seamlessly into the atmosphere. "Claire!" A familiar voice called. She turned to see Henry Walker approaching, his demeanor as confident as ever. He wore a sharp black tuxedo, and the warmth in his expression put her somewhat at ease. "I'm so glad you came," he said, extending a hand. Claire shook it, feeling a mix of gratitude and nervousness. "I wasn't sure I belonged here," she admitted. "You absolutely do," Henry said firmly. "Come, let me show you around." Henry guided her through the crowd, introducing her to a few of his colleagues and friends. Though they were polite, Claire could feel their subtle curiosity. Who was this woman who seemed so out of place? She reminded herself to smile, but the weight of their glances tugged at her confidence. As the evening progressed, Henry stepped onto the stage at the front of the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice steady and engaging. Thank you for joining us tonight at our annual charity gala. Tonight, we celebrate the incredible power of compassion and the profound ways even small acts of kindness can ripple through lives. Claire listened intently, her hands nervously gripping the stem of her glass. "I want to share a story," Henry continued. "A few days ago, my family and I found ourselves in an unexpected situation. A simple meal at a diner became a moment we'll never forget, thanks to a young woman who didn't think twice about helping strangers." Claire froze. She could feel eyes shifting toward her, murmurs spreading across the room. "That young woman is Claire," Henry said, gesturing toward her. "She paid for our meal without hesitation, even though she has her own struggles. Her selflessness reminded me of something I learned long ago. Kindness doesn't require wealth or power, it only requires heart." The room erupted into applause. Claire's cheeks burned as she nodded shyly, wishing she could disappear into the floor, yet feeling an unfamiliar sense of pride. After the applause died down, Henry descended from the stage and made his way back. To Claire. "I hope I didn't embarrass you," he said, a playful glint in his eye. Claire let out a nervous laugh. "A little, maybe, but thank you." Henry gestured toward a quieter corner of the room. "Let's talk for a moment." They stepped away from the crowd, and Henry's expression grew more serious. "Claire," he began, "there's something you should know. Your act of kindness didn't just touch my family, it brought back memories of someone who changed. My life years ago." Claire tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her, his gaze steady. "That someone was your mother," he said softly. Claire's breath caught. "My mother?" Henry nodded. "When I was a boy, I lived in an orphanage. It was a difficult time, but there was a volunteer who made everything brighter. She read to us, helped with our homework, and reminded us we were worth something. That volunteer was your mother, and I've never forgotten her." Claire unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a letter, written in her mother's neat handwriting. "To the children I've been blessed to know," it began, "the world may seem unfair at times, but never doubt your worth. Each of you has a light inside you that can brighten the darkest places. My hope is that you will carry that light forward, and one day help others see their own." Tears blurred Claire's vision as she read the letter. The words felt like a bridge across time, connecting her to the woman who had always been her hero. "She gave me hope when I had none," Henry said, his voice low. "And now, seeing you do the same for others, it's like her legacy lives on through you." Claire clutched the letter to her chest, overwhelmed by the weight of what she had just learned. As the gala wound down, Claire found herself standing by one of the grand windows, staring out at the city lights. Her heart was a whirlwind of emotions, gratitude, pride, and a newfound understanding of her mother's impact. Henry approached her once more. "You have her spirit, Claire," he said, "and I believe you can do incredible things." She nodded, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Thank you for showing me this." The night ended with a quiet determination growing within Claire. For the first time in years, she felt like her life had a purpose beyond survival. The small apartment was quiet, save for the occasional hum of passing cars outside. Claire sat at her kitchen table, the dim light from the overhead bulb casting soft shadows across the worn wooden surface. In her hands, she held the letter Henry had given her at the gala. The edges were slightly frayed, as though it had been folded and unfolded many times before. She read it again, her mother's familiar handwriting evoking a swell of emotions. "To the children I've been blessed to know the world may seem unfair at times, but never doubt your worth. Each of you has a light inside you that can brighten the darkest places. My hope is that you will carry that light forward, and one day help others see their own." Claire's vision blurred as she reread the final lines. Her mother had always been a quiet force of strength in her life, someone who believed in small acts of kindness as a way to change the world. Yet her mother had never spoken about volunteering at an orphanage or the impact she'd had on so many lives. "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire whispered to the silence, her fingers tracing the familiar loops of her mother's handwriting. The letter was more than words. It was a window into a part of her mother's life that Claire had never known. It stirred questions that felt both urgent and impossible to answer. What had driven her mother to help others so selflessly, and why had she kept it hidden? Determined to learn more, Claire rose from the table and headed to the hall closet. Inside, stacked haphazardly on the top shelf, were a few boxes of her mother's belongings that she hadn't had the heart to go through since her passing. Dust tickled her nose as she pulled them down, the cardboard edges soft from age. She opened the first box cautiously, revealing an assortment of items, old photo albums, notebooks, and loose papers. A faint scent of lavender wafted up, her mother's favorite fragrance. Claire flipped open an album, her fingers brushing over black and white. Photos of smiling children, their eyes full of hope. Many were posed alongside her mother, who stood at the center of the group, her arms wrapped around them with the same warmth Claire had always known. Tucked behind one photo was a small note, handwritten in a child's uneven scrawl. "Dear Miss Ellen, thank you for always making me feel special. You said I could be anything, and now I believe it. Love, Peter." Claire's chest tightened. She recognized the name. Peter had been one of the children Henry mentioned at the gala. As she sifted through the box, she found more notes like it, each one brimming with gratitude and admiration for her mother. The more Claire uncovered, the clearer it became. Her mother's kindness had touched countless lives. Among the papers, Claire found a faded journal. She opened it carefully, the binding fragile with age. Inside were entries written by her mother during her years volunteering at the orphanage. Today, Peter learned to read his first full sentence. He was so proud, and so was I. These children remind me every day why kindness matters. It's not about changing the world all at once, but about changing one life at a time. Claire read, entry after entry, her tears falling freely. The journal painted a vivid picture of her mother's dedication, her unwavering belief that even the smallest gestures could create ripples of change. But what struck Claire the most was how little her mother had ever spoken about these moments. For her, it had never been about recognition. It had been about the children and the hope she could give them. As the night stretched on, Claire found herself reflecting on her own life. She had spent so much time simply trying to survive, paying bills, taking care of her father, and getting through each day. But this discovery made her wonder if there was something more. Her mother's legacy wasn't just in the past. It was a call to action. Perhaps she could find a way to continue that work, to honor her mother's memory by helping others. For the first time in years, Claire felt a spark of inspiration, a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life. As she carefully placed the items back into the box, something caught her eye, a small envelope tucked beneath the journal. It was yellowed with age, and her name was written on the front in her mother's neat handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it, unfolding the single sheet inside. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. But my hope for you has always been the same, that you find joy not just in what you achieve, but in the lives you touch along the way. You have a heart full of kindness, just like your father. Never doubt the difference you can make, even if it feels small. Remember, it's not about changing the world. It's about being the light for someone who needs it. With all my love, Mom. Claire pressed the letter to her chest, her tears coming freely. Her mother's words felt like a gentle push, urging her towards something greater. As the first rays of dawn crept through the window, Claire sat back at the kitchen table, the envelope and letter resting before her. Her heart felt heavier, and, lighter all at once, heavier with the weight of her mother's legacy and lighter with the clarity of what she needed to do. The world outside was waking up, and so was Claire. This was just the beginning. The towering glass facade of Walker Technologies loomed over Claire as she stood outside, clutching her bag tightly. The building was a gleaming symbol of success, its polished exterior reflecting the morning sun. Claire had barely slept the night before, her thoughts racing with equal parts excitement and anxiety. She adjusted her simple blazer, a second-hand find that she had ironed meticulously, and took a deep breath. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. With a shaky resolve, she pushed through the revolving doors and stepped into the bustling lobby. The air inside was cool and crisp, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the hum of conversations and clicking heels. People moved with purpose, their tailored suits and confident strides making Claire feel acutely out of place. A receptionist with a practiced smile greeted her. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm Claire Porter," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm starting today in the Charitable Initiatives Department." The receptionist's smile brightened. "Welcome, Ms. Porter. Mr. Walker mentioned you'd be joining us. Let me call someone to escort you." Moments later, a young woman named Sarah appeared, her friendly demeanor immediately putting Claire at ease. "Hi, Claire. I'm Sarah. I'll be showing you around today." Sarah led her through sleek hallways lined with abstract artwork and glass-walled conference rooms. Every corner of the building exuded efficiency and sophistication, a world away from the modest diner Claire had called home for so long. As they reached the Charitable Initiatives Department, Claire's nerves returned. This was where she would begin her new role, overseeing community-focused projects and helping to expand the company's philanthropic reach. "This is your desk," Sarah said, gesturing to a workspace near the corner with a window view. "Mr. Walker will join us later for a brief introduction, but for now, feel free to settle in." Claire nodded, thanking Sarah before sitting at her desk. She ran her fingers over the polished surface, marveling at how surreal it all felt. She had never imagined herself in a place like this. Her initial awe was interrupted by a voice behind her. "So you're the new addition everyone's been talking about." Claire turned to see a woman in her late 30s with a sharp bob and an even sharper gaze. "I'm Julia," the woman said, her tone cordial but lacking warmth. "I oversee most of the major projects in this department." Claire extended a hand. "It's nice to meet you, Julia. I'm Claire." Julia shook her hand briefly, her lips curving into a polite but thin smile. "You must be pretty special to have Mr. Walker bring you on board personally." Claire caught the faint edge in her words, but chose not to engage. "I'm just here to do my best and contribute however I can." "We'll see," Julia said before turning and walking away. Claire exhaled, her initial excitement dimmed slightly. The interactions with other colleagues were friendlier, but tinged with curiosity. It was clear that her direct connection to Henry Walker had made her a subject of intrigue, and perhaps skepticism. The day passed in a blur of introductions, onboarding sessions, and briefings on the department's current projects. Claire listened intently, taking notes and asking questions when appropriate, but the weight of her inexperience was hard to ignore. During lunch, Sarah joined her in the break room. "Don't mind Julia," she said, as though reading Claire's thoughts. "She's tough, but she respects hard work. Once she sees what you're capable of, she'll come around." Claire nodded, grateful for Sarah's encouragement. Still, the shadow of doubt lingered. Was she really capable of succeeding here? Could she meet the expectations of people who seemed so far ahead of her in experience and confidence? By the end of the day, Henry Walker called a team meeting in the conference room. Claire found herself seated at the long table, surrounded by seasoned professionals. "Thank you all for coming," Henry began, his tone both commanding and approachable. As you know, we're preparing for the annual Community Uplift project. This year, we aim to support struggling families by providing access to education and job training resources. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room before landing on Claire. Claire, I'd like you to assist Julia with organizing the outreach efforts for this project. It'll be a great way for you to get familiar with how we operate. Julia's expression was unreadable, but Claire felt the weight of her scrutiny. Of course, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. After the meeting, Julia approached her. The Uplift project is a big deal, she said matter-of-factly. There's no room for mistakes. Claire met her gaze, her resolve hardening. I understand. I'll give it everything I've got. That evening, as Claire rode the bus home, she replayed the day's events in her mind. The elegant office, the wary glances, the high expectations. It was overwhelming, but as she opened her bag and pulled out the small envelope containing her mother's letter, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Never doubt the difference you can make, even if it feels small. Claire stared out the window at the city lights, her grip tightening on the letter. She might feel out of place now, but she was determined to prove to herself and to others that she belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Claire was ready to face them head-on. The meeting room buzzed with quiet energy as the team for the Community Uplift project gathered around the large table. Claire sat near the corner, her notebook open and pen poised, ready to absorb every detail. The stakes felt high. This was her first major responsibility at Walker Technologies, and she was determined to prove she belonged. At the head of the table, Julia clicked through a presentation on the projector. Her voice was clear and authoritative as she outlined the project's scope. This year's focus is on educational access and job training for underprivileged families, Julia explained. We'll partner with local organizations to provide resources like school supplies, career workshops, and mentorship programs. It's an ambitious plan, but we've never aimed for anything less. Claire nodded along, impressed by the scale of the initiative. Yet, as Julia continued listing tasks and deadlines, the weight of the project began to settle on her shoulders. Claire, Julia said, turning her sharp gaze toward her, you'll be responsible for coordinating with the outreach teams and ensuring the logistics are aligned. That means managing the schedules for workshops, securing venues, and maintaining communication with our partners. Claire's stomach tightened. It was a lot to take on, especially for someone new to the corporate world. But she squared her shoulders and met Julia's gaze. Understood. I'll get started right away. Over the next few days, Claire dove headfirst into her work. She spent hours drafting schedules, sending emails, and juggling the countless moving parts of the project. Her lack of experience meant she often had to double-check her work, and every small mistake felt like a glaring flaw. Some colleagues offered help, like Sarah, who patiently answered Claire's questions. But Julia's presence remained a constant. Pressure. Remember, Julia said one afternoon, as she reviewed Claire's draft schedule, this project isn't just about getting things done. It's about getting them done perfectly. These families are counting on us. Her words stung, even though Claire knew they weren't meant to be cruel. She nodded, determined to meet the high standards. The first major hurdle came unexpectedly. A critical workshop was scheduled for the following week, but Claire discovered, almost too late, that the venue they had secured had double-booked the date. Panic set in as she realized the error could derail the event entirely. She hurried to Julia's office, the printed schedule clutched in her hand. I need to tell you something, Claire began, her voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling. Underneath, Julia looked up from her desk, her expression neutral but expectant. What is it? Claire explained the situation, her heart sinking as Julia's brows furrowed. This is exactly why I told you to triple-check everything, Julia said, Her tone clipped. "Mistakes like this cost us time and credibility. Fix it, Claire." The word stung, but Claire knew she couldn't afford to dwell on them. She left the office with a renewed determination to salvage the situation. Back at her desk, Claire forced herself to think clearly. She reviewed the list of nearby venues, cross-referencing their availability and proximity to the target community. After several calls and some creative negotiating, she secured a new location that could accommodate the event on the same date, but the challenge wasn't over. She had to inform all attendees of the change, reprint promotional materials, and adjust the schedules of the facilitators, all within a tight timeline. With Sarah's help, Claire worked late into the night. By the time she left the office, her eyes burned from exhaustion, but the event was back on track. The following week, the workshop went off without a hitch. Families arrived at the new venue, where volunteers distributed school supplies and led sessions on resume building and job interview techniques. Claire stood near the entrance, watching as parents and children moved between stations, their smiles a testament to the event's success. A small sense of pride bloomed in her chest. Despite the setback, she had pulled it together. As the last attendees left, Julia approached Claire. For a moment, her expression was unreadable, but then she nodded slightly. "You handled the situation." "Well," Julia said, "most people would have panicked and made excuses, but you found a solution. Good work." The praise was understated, but coming from Julia, it felt monumental. Claire managed a small smile. "Thank you. I'll do better next time." "We'll see," Julia replied, her lips twitching in what might have been the start of a smile before she turned and walked away. That evening, Claire sat on the bus ride home, her mind replaying the day's events. The weight of the setback still lingered, but so did the satisfaction of overcoming it. She pulled out her mother's letter, as she often did during moments of doubt. Her mother's words felt like a quiet reminder that mistakes didn't define her. How she responded to them did. For the first time since joining Walker Technologies, Claire felt a small but growing confidence in herself. The journey was far from over, but she was learning to navigate it one step at a time. The buzz of conversation filled the meeting room as the charitable initiatives team gathered around the long conference table. Claire sat near the middle, flipping through her notes and carefully reviewing her progress on the next phase of the Community Uplift Project. She had worked tirelessly over the past few weeks, building on the momentum of the first successful workshop. Each day brought new challenges, but she tackled them with determination, eager to prove herself. Still, there were moments when the weight of expectations felt overwhelming, especially when Julia was around. At the head of the table, Julia was presenting updates on the project. Her tone was sharp and efficient as she discussed timelines, partnerships, and goals. "Next, we'll hear from Claire," Julia said, stepping aside to let Claire take the floor. Claire rose, clutching her notebook. She shared her updates on scheduling the next workshop series, highlighting her efforts to secure additional resources and build stronger connections with local organizations. When she finished, Claire glanced around the room, hoping to gauge her colleagues' reactions. Most nodded politely, but Julia's expression remained neutral. "That's an interesting approach," Julia said after a brief pause. "But don't you think relying so heavily on external partnerships might be risky? It seems like a shortcut. Rather than building something sustainable internally." The comment hung in the air, sharper than it needed to be. Claire's cheeks flushed as she processed the veiled criticism. "I understand your concern," Claire replied, keeping her tone steady. "But I believe leveraging these partnerships allows us to reach more families faster while we develop longer-term solutions." Julia arched an eyebrow. "Let's hope it works, but next time I suggest consulting with the team more thoroughly before making these decisions." The room grew tense. Claire forced herself to nod, biting back the urge to defend herself further. She could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her, some sympathetic, others curious. Later that afternoon, Claire found herself in the break room, nursing a cup of coffee. Her mind replayed the meeting, each of Julia's words cutting deeper with every repetition. Rough morning. Sarah's voice broke through her thoughts. Claire glanced up and managed a weak smile. Something like that. Sarah hesitated, before sitting across from her. Don't take Julia's comments personally. She's tough on everyone, especially when she feels threatened. Claire frowned. Threatened? By me? She might not admit it, but yeah, Sarah said. You've done a great job so far, and she sees that, but she's been here for years, trying to prove herself. It's not easy being a single mom in a role like hers. The words gave Claire pause. She hadn't known about Julia's personal life, and the revelation shifted something in her perspective. She's a single mom, Claire asked. Sarah nodded. She has a young son. Balancing this job and parenting isn't easy. Doesn't excuse everything, but it might explain why she's so guarded. That evening, Claire stayed late to finish her work. As she walked past Julia's office, she noticed the faint glow of a desk lamp inside. Curious, she peeked through the open door. Julia was hunched over her desk, surrounded by papers and her laptop. Her posture was tense, and her usually composed face showed signs of exhaustion. Claire hesitated. Part of her wanted to keep walking, to let Julia deal with her own struggles. But then she remembered her mother's words. Kindness doesn't require recognition, it just requires heart. Taking a deep breath, Claire knocked lightly on the doorframe. Julia? Julia looked up, surprised. Claire, what are you still doing here? I could ask you the same thing, Claire said with a small smile. It looks like you've got a lot on your plate. Need any help? Julia blinked, clearly caught off guard. No, I've got it covered. Claire stepped into the office, her tone gentle. I'm serious. If there's something I can do, let me know. We're on the same team, right? For a moment, Julia said nothing. Then she sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. It's just these reports. They need to be finalized by tomorrow, and I'm running behind. Let me help, Claire offered. 2 sets of hands are better than 1. Reluctantly, Julia slid a stack of papers across the desk. Fine, but don't think this means I'm going easy on you, Claire smiled. I wouldn't dream of it. As they worked together, the tension between them gradually eased. Claire kept the conversation light, asking Julia about her son. He's 7, Julia said, her tone softening for the first time. Smart kid, loves reading just like I did at his age. But sometimes it feels like I'm missing everything because of this job. Claire nodded, understanding the unspoken guilt in Julia's words. It must be tough balancing everything. It is, Julia admitted, but I want him to have a better life. That's why I push so hard here, to make sure he never has to struggle like I did. The admission surprised Claire, and for the first time she saw Julia not as a rival, but as someone fighting her own battles. I get it, Claire said, and for what it's worth, I think you're doing an amazing job. Your son's lucky. To have you. Julia glanced at her, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. Thanks, and for what it's worth, you're not bad yourself. By the time they finished, the reports were neatly stacked, and the tension that had defined their relationship felt less heavy. Good work tonight, Julia said as they packed up. Don't make me regret saying this, but I might actually start trusting you. Claire laughed softly. I'll try not to let you down. As she left the office, Claire felt a sense of accomplishment. She knew their truce was fragile, but it was a step in the right direction. The early morning sun bathed the city in a warm glow as Claire stood outside the event venue, clipboard in hand. The spacious community centre, freshly decorated with banners and booths, buzzed with activity as volunteers prepared for the day. Ahead, this was the largest initiative Claire had ever coordinated, and the stakes felt monumental. Everything okay? Sarah's cheerful voice broke through Claire's thoughts. Claire turned, offering a small smile. So far, so good. Let's hope it stays that way. Sarah patted her shoulder reassuringly. You've got this. The team's behind you. Claire nodded, though her nerves lingered. Months of planning had led to this day, a career fair and skills workshop designed to connect struggling families with job opportunities and educational resources. The scope of the project was daunting, but the potential impact kept her focused. Inside, booths representing local businesses and educational programs lined the walls. Tables were stacked with pamphlets, and volunteers bustled about, setting up displays and arranging chairs. Julia approached Claire, clipboard in hand. Her usual sharp demeanor softened slightly. The schedule looks tight, but everything seems on track. Let's just hope those training kits arrive on time. Claire nodded. The kits, containing materials for the workshops, were a critical component of the event. She had confirmed the delivery the day before, but the thought of something going wrong still gnawed at her. Thanks, Julia, Claire said, appreciating the subtle encouragement in her tone. Julia hesitated for a moment before adding, You've done good work here. Claire, don't let the nerves get to you. The words, though brief, felt like a milestone in their evolving dynamic. By mid-morning, families began streaming into the venue. Parents and children moved between booths, speaking with company representatives and exploring opportunities. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, and Claire allowed herself a moment to breathe. That moment was short-lived. Claire! A volunteer called, hurrying toward her. We just got a call. The training kits are delayed. There's been a mix-up with the shipping company, and they won't arrive until tomorrow. Claire's heart sank. The kits contained essential materials for the workshops, scheduled to start in less than an hour. Without them, key parts of the event would be jeopardized. Okay, Claire said, forcing herself to stay calm. Let's think. We can't wait. Until tomorrow. So we need a backup plan. Do we have extra supplies on site? The volunteer shook her head. Not enough for everyone. Claire glanced around the room, her mind racing. The families were here, eager and hopeful. Cancelling the workshops wasn't an option. Claire approached Julia and Sarah, explaining the situation quickly. Julia frowned, but didn't waste time assigning blame. What's the plan? Julia asked. Claire hesitated for only a moment before answering. We'll pivot. We'll break the workshops into smaller sessions and have facilitators focus on hands-on guidance instead of relying on the kits. Sarah, can you gather the volunteers and let them know? Julia, can you help reorganize the schedule to accommodate the changes? Both women nodded, moving with purpose. Claire took a deep breath and stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room, addressing the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. We've had a small hiccup with some of our materials, but we're making adjustments to ensure that everyone still has a valuable experience. We appreciate your patience and flexibility. The attendees murmured their understanding, and Claire quickly joined the team to implement the revised plan. Despite the rocky start, the workshops proceeded smoothly. Facilitators adapted to the smaller sessions, offering personalized guidance that many attendees found even more helpful than the original plan. Parents left with newfound confidence, while teens and young adults eagerly signed up for mentorship programs and job interviews. One mother approached Claire at the end of the day, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you for doing this," she said. "It's been so hard trying to make ends meet, but today gave me hope for my family's future." Claire smiled, her chest tightening with emotion. "That's what we're here for," she replied. As the last attendees filed out and the team began cleaning up, Henry Walker arrived, his usual composed demeanor tinged with pride. "I heard about the hiccup this morning," he said, approaching. "Claire, and how you handled it. Impressive work." "Thank you," Claire said, trying to hide her surprise. It was a team effort. True, Henry said, but it takes strong leadership to adapt under pressure. You've shown that. Today, Julia, standing nearby, nodded in agreement. She's right, she added, her tone more genuine than Claire had ever heard. You handled it better than most seasoned professionals would have. The praise felt surreal, but Claire accepted it with a humble smile. That evening, as Claire returned home, exhaustion settled over her like a heavy blanket. But it was a good kind of exhaustion, one that came from knowing she had made a difference. Sitting at her small kitchen table, she unfolded her mother's letter once more. Never doubt the difference you can make, even if it feels small. Claire traced the words with her fingers, a quiet determination growing within her. Today had been a success, but she knew this was only the beginning. Greater challenges lay ahead, and she was ready to face them, one step at a time. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon greeted Claire as she stepped into the diner. It was early morning, and the place looked just as she remembered. Scuffed linoleum floors, faded vinyl booths, and the comforting hum of the coffee machine in the background. "Claire, is that you?" Claire turned to see Linda, the longtime cook and heart of the diner, bustling out from behind the counter. Her warm smile made Claire's nerves ease slightly. "It's been ages!" Linda exclaimed, pulling Claire into a tight hug. "What brings you back to our little corner of the world?" "I'm here to set up a charity event," Claire explained. "I wanted to give back to the community that's been such a big part of my life." Linda beamed, her hands still, resting on Claire's shoulders. "You always had a heart of gold. Let me know if you need anything. I'm happy to help." As Claire walked further inside, memories flooded back. This was where she had spent countless hours working, serving coffee and meals to neighbors she had known her whole life. It was where she had struggled to make ends meet, but also where she had learned the value of community. The event was scheduled for that afternoon, and Claire wasted no time getting everything ready. Tables were set up outside the diner, adorned with baskets of fresh produce and pamphlets about job opportunities and educational programs. Volunteers worked efficiently, setting up a small stage and organizing stations where families could access resources. The turnout was already promising. Families began trickling in, curious about the event. Some recognized Claire, waving or stopping to chat briefly. Others approached hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. "You've done an amazing job," Sarah said, appearing at Claire's side. Sarah had driven down to help, her usual enthusiasm undiminished by the long trip. "Thanks," Claire replied, scanning the growing crowd. "But the real work starts now." As the event got underway, Claire moved from station to station, ensuring everything ran smoothly. She reconnected with old co-workers and neighbors, their conversations filled with warmth and laughter. One of her former regulars, Mr. Thompson, shook her hand with a grin. "Didn't I always say you'd do great things, Claire? Looks like I was right." "You were too kind, as always," Claire replied, laughing. The more people she spoke with, the more she was reminded of why she had taken this path. These were the people who had supported her, encouraged her, and shown her the power of a close-knit community. Midway through the event, Claire noticed a familiar family standing near one of the resource tables, a man, a woman, and their young son. Her heart skipped a beat as recognition dawned. It was the family she had helped at the diner months ago. When their card had been declined, "Excuse me," she said, walking toward them. "It's so good to see you again." The father turned, his expression lighting up. "Claire, I can't believe it's you." The mother stepped forward, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "We've been looking for a way to thank you. That night, it meant everything to us." The boy, now a little taller, smiled up at her. "Hi, Miss Claire," he said shyly. Claire knelt to his level, smiling warmly. "Hello again. You've grown." The father cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. "After that night, we promised ourselves we wouldn't let our struggles define us. We worked hard to get back on our feet, and now we try to help others the way you helped us." Hearing their story brought tears to Claire's eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she said softly, "but you didn't need to thank me. You did all the hard work yourselves." The mother shook her head. "You gave us hope when we had none. That's not something we'll ever forget." As the family moved on, Claire stood for a moment, taking it all in. She had always believed in the power of small acts of kindness, but hearing how her actions had inspired others was a revelation. The rest of the day passed in a blur of handshakes, hugs, and heartfelt conversations. Families left with not only tangible resources, but also a renewed sense of hope. As the sun began to set, Claire stood outside the diner, watching the volunteers pack up. The day had been an undeniable success, but it was more than that. It had been a reminder of how far she had come and how much further she could go. Julia approached, her arms crossed, but her expression soft. "You pulled it off, Claire. It was impressive." "Thank you," Claire said, her voice steady. Julia nodded. "You've got something special. Don't lose it." Claire watched as Julia walked away, her words leaving a lasting impression. The last of the tables were loaded into trucks. Claire lingered by the diner's entrance. This place, once a symbol of struggle, now felt like a beacon of possibility. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "It's not about changing the world all at once. It's about being the light for someone who needs it." With a deep breath, Claire turned toward the setting sun, her heart full of gratitude and determination. She was ready for whatever came next. The sun hung low on the horizon as the final moments of the charity event unfolded. Families lingered, chatting with volunteers and browsing the last few resource booths. The glow of satisfaction filled the air, each conversation, handshake, and smile a testament to the event's success. Claire stood near the small stage at the center of the venue, her clipboard in hand. The day had been a whirlwind, but as the crowd began to gather for the closing ceremony, she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. "Ready?" Sarah asked, appearing beside her with an encouraging smile. Claire nodded, though her heart fluttered with nerves. "As ready as I'll ever be." Taking a deep breath, Claire stepped onto the stage. The soft hum of conversation quieted as the audience turned their attention to her. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I want to thank each and every one of you for making today possible. This event wasn't just about resources or workshops. It was about showing what we can achieve when we come together as a community." Her eyes swept over the crowd, landing briefly on familiar faces. Linda from the diner, Julia standing with a group of volunteers, and even Henry Walker at the back, his presence a steady reassurance. "When I first started this journey, I wasn't sure if I belonged in a place like this," Claire continued. "But over time, I've learned that making a difference doesn't require perfection. It requires heart, and I've seen so much of that today, in every volunteer, every partner, and every family here. Thank you for reminding me of what's possible when we believe in each other." Applause erupted as Claire stepped back, her cheeks flushing. The sense of connection in the room was palpable, a shared acknowledgement of something greater than themselves. As the crowd dispersed, Henry approached, his expression warm yet contemplative. "Claire," he began, his tone softer than usual, "that was a wonderful speech." "Thank you," she replied, tucking her clipboard under her arm. "But this was a team effort. I couldn't have done it without everyone here." Henry smiled, his hands slipping into his pockets. "That humility is part of what makes you so effective. But there's something I need to share with you, something I should have told you sooner." Claire's brow furrowed in curiosity. "What is it?" Henry gestured toward a quieter corner of the venue, and they walked together, away from the remaining guests. Once they were alone, he pulled out a small folder from his briefcase and handed it to her. Claire opened it cautiously, her breath catching as she scanned the contents. Inside were letters, photographs, and documents, each one bearing her mother's handwriting. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's part of your mother's story," Henry said. "Years ago, before she volunteered. At the orphanage, she went through a difficult period. She was struggling to support you as a single parent, but even then, she never stopped thinking about how she could help others." He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. "At the time, I was just starting out, trying to build my company. I didn't know your mother well, but our paths crossed. She approached me with an idea, a vision for a charitable foundation that could provide long-term support for families like hers. I helped her secure some initial funding, but life got in the way, and the dream was never realized." Claire's hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. Among them was a letter addressed to Henry, written in her mother's careful script. "Dear Mr. Walker, thank you for believing in this vision. Even if I'm not the one to see it through, I know that every small step brings us closer to a brighter future. With gratitude, Ellen Porter." Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she read the words. "She never told me any of this," she murmured. "She didn't want to burden you," Henry said gently, "but her dream never faded. And now, Claire, I believe it's time to bring it to life." Henry handed her another folder, this one filled with detailed plans and financial projections. "I've been holding on to these documents for years, waiting for the right moment. I believe that moment is now. I'd like to help you establish the foundation your mother envisioned. Together, we can create something that honors her legacy and makes a lasting impact." Claire stared at the folder, her mind racing. The weight of the opportunity felt immense, exciting yet terrifying. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted. "It's such a big responsibility." Henry placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've already proven that you have the heart and determination to make a difference. You don't have to do it alone. We'll build this together." As the evening wind carried the sounds of the closing event into the quiet corner, Claire stood with the folders in her hands, her heart pounding. This was the moment everything had been building toward, a chance to honor her mother's memory and create something meaningful. But it also meant stepping into a role she had never imagined for herself, shouldering a responsibility that felt both daunting and exhilarating. Claire closed her eyes, letting the weight of the decision settle over her. When she opened them, there was a spark of determination. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady, "for my mother, and for everyone who needs this." Henry smiled, his expression filled with pride. "Then let's get to work." The grand hall was abuzz with energy. Hundreds of chairs were neatly arranged, and the stage was adorned with a simple but elegant banner that read, "Ellen Porter Foundation, Building Brighter Futures Together." Claire stood backstage, her hands gripping the edges of the podium she was about to carry onto the stage. Through the curtain, she could hear the hum of conversations, the occasional bursts of laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Familiar faces filled the room. Henry Walker, Julia, Sarah, and many of the people who had played a role in her journey. But there were also strangers, supporters from across the city and beyond, all gathered to celebrate the launch of a dream. Long deferred but finally realized, Claire took a deep breath, her nerves giving way to a quiet determination. This wasn't just her moment, it was her mother's. Stepping onto the stage, Claire was greeted with warm applause. The spotlight was bright, but it didn't overwhelm her. She adjusted the microphone and began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here to celebrate a moment that means so much to me and to countless others." The room fell silent, every eye on her. "Some of you know my story. I started as a waitress in a small-town diner, struggling to make ends meet while caring for my father. At the time, I didn't think my life would ever extend beyond those walls. But one act of kindness, paying for a family's meal when they couldn't, set off a chain of events that led me here today. That act wasn't extraordinary. It was something my mother taught me through the way she lived her life. She believed in the power of small actions, the belief that kindness can ripple outward and create change in ways we may never see. Her voice wavered slightly as she continued. This foundation is built on that belief. It's a tribute to my mother, Ellen Porter, whose unwavering compassion shaped everything I am. She dreamed of a world where no one felt invisible, where even the smallest gestures could lift someone out of despair. And though she didn't live to see it, today we bring her vision to life. Claire gestured to a large cloth-covered plaque on the stage. I'd like to unveil this dedication in her honor. With a gentle tug, she removed the cloth, revealing a bronze plaque that read, Ellen Porter Foundation, dedicated to the power of kindness and the spirit of community. The audience erupted into applause, and Claire noticed several people wiping away tears. Her own vision blurred as she took a moment to steady herself. As the applause subsided, Claire continued, The Ellen Porter Foundation isn't just about remembering the past. It's about building the future. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce our first major initiative, a nationwide program providing educational resources, mentorship opportunities, and job training to underserved communities. This program isn't just about helping people survive, it's about giving them the tools to thrive. It's about empowering individuals to believe in themselves and their potential. Excitement rippled through the room as Claire outlined the details of the program. Local partnerships, scholarships, and mentorship networks would form the backbone of the initiative, with plans to expand as the foundation grew. As the event wound down, Claire stepped outside for a moment of solitude. The crisp night air filled her lungs as she gazed up at the stars, her heart full yet calm. Henry joined her, his footsteps soft against the stone path. You did it, he said, his voice warm. Claire turned to him, a smile tugging at her lips. We did it. I couldn't have gotten here without you. Henry waved a dismissive hand. You were always capable, Claire. You just needed someone to show you the door. You're the one who walked through it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Henry spoke again. Your mother would be proud, Claire nodded, her chest tightening with emotion. I hope so. She always believed in the power of kindness, even when it didn't seem like enough. Now, I finally understand what she meant. As Claire walked back into the hall, she was greeted by Julia and Sarah, who were deep in conversation about the foundation's next steps. Volunteers moved about, cleaning up and chatting excitedly about the success of the evening. Claire felt a sense of belonging that she hadn't known was possible. The shy, uncertain waitress she had once been felt like a distant memory. In her place stood a woman who had found her purpose, not just in honoring her mother's legacy, but in building one of her own. Her mother's words echoed in her mind once more. It's not about changing the world all at once. It's about being the light for someone who needs it. Looking out at the people she had inspired, Claire knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it, knowing she carried her mother's spirit and the strength of a community with her. With a deep breath, she smiled, stepping forward into a future she had once thought impossible, but now saw as limitless. This chapter is complete and provides a heartfelt, fulfilling ending to the story. Let me know if you need further refinements or if there's anything else you'd like to address. And so, Claire's journey reminds us all that even the smallest acts of kindness can grow into something extraordinary. From a simple gesture in a small-town diner to creating a foundation that transforms lives, Claire's story shows the power of compassion and determination. Where are you watching this video from? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story moved or inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our community. By subscribing, you'll help us continue sharing meaningful stories that uplift and connect us all. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. We appreciate your time and support. Until next time, stay kind, stay inspired, and we'll see you in the next video.